Tanse, Wapastim Kokosa Netikosa Kine Poet. Good morning. My name is Wapastim Harper, and I'm from Barons River First Nation. I'm a 17-year-old Neheo Skakwish. First of all, I want to acknowledge all the schools here today. It's nice to see all these youth being a part of a conversation that will shape the future of our people. I want to acknowledge the elders here today as well. It's nice to see that your school division has such important people, and it's good that you have these teachings available and that you make good use of them. So thank you for inviting me. There's some things that I want to share with you, and one of them is a short video I made last year. I was asked for my school to share my views as an Indigenous youth on reconciliation. So this is my video. So to give a little background on the video you watched, it was just a quick assignment that I was asked to make by my school. And what it talks about is my trip to El Salvador that I took that year. And it also explains how I met with the Indigenous people down there and how we discussed a lot about our histories and the stuff that we have gone through as Indigenous people. One of the things that we talked about was the fact how our youth have troubles on our day-to-day lives describing who we are to non-Indigenous people. We always get shot down, and I know I have when I try to share my history and my beliefs. It's something that's common not only here in Canada but in El Salvador. There's a lot of things that we as youth go through that not everyone understands or takes the time to understand, but we're on a path that will take a long time to get that recognition. But we're on that path right now, and it's important to realize that and realize the role that you have. So to share more stuff with you, reconciliation in the dictionary means to restore to friendly terms or to the restoration of friendly relations. Reconciliation is also a term used to describe a process where Canada and other governments look at ways of recognizing and implementing Indigenous rights in Canada. For instance, Canada has realized that for years of oppression has had negative impacts on First Nations people. The history of our people is not a pleasant one. The taking of our homelands and traditional territories was carried out by deception, trickery, and questionable dealings through treaty process with the Crown of England. Part of reconciliation is to correct those wrongs that were done to us. As youth, and it doesn't matter what nationality you are, we need to do our part in the reconciliation process, to understand our histories and to eliminate discrimination and racism, and to eliminate the myths about First Nations people. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission is a federal commission that investigated the treatment of First Nations students in residential schools. The recommendations stemming from the commission, known as the calls to action, were mostly directed toward the governments to reconcile the physical and psychological suffering inflicted on the residential school survivors. I believe the reconciliation process is a good thing because it acknowledges the negative impacts that were caused by colonial laws and policies. The damage has been huge, and it continues today, what they call intergenerational effects, and it impacts the First Nation youth and will continue if nothing's done about it. However, the good thing is that the long path toward reconciliation has started in Canada, which is initiated by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There have been many Truth and Reconciliation Commissions around the world that look into the atrocities on human life. Commissions are set up to look into different kinds of situations, such as the effects of war on Indigenous peoples or even the deliberate killing of Indigenous peoples as a part of government policy. In Canada, the human rights violations that existed at residential schools led to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2008 to 2015. Then, the calls to action made recommendations to the federal, provincial, municipal governments, churches, and even Indian Act bands to change their current policies and practices in order to deal with the imminent damages on the Indigenous peoples. There are a total of 94 calls to action and recommendations. But to me, reconciliation is more than just restoring to friendly relations or trying to make amends. It also involves a decolonization process, which is taking back what rightfully belongs to First Nations. To me, decolonization means nation rebuilding, restoring jurisdiction, and sharing our ancestral lands and resources. Reconciliation is also a two-way process. We have to deal with restoring our rights for the governments to assist in the reconciliation process. I think the Truth and Reconciliation made strong recommendations, such as curriculum on residential schools and on the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and teaching about treaties. The curriculum also makes it easier for non-Indigenous people to understand about First Nation history and importance of the reconciliation process. This is also a priority for First Nation youth. Implementing Recommendation 9211 would help make the lack of employment for First Nations better. It states, ensure that Aboriginal peoples have equitable access to jobs, training, education, and opportunities in the corporate sector, and that Aboriginal communities gain long-term sustainable benefits from economic development projects. I see this benefiting our people now and into the future. We all are children, we're all youth, we all want to make our dreams happen, we all want to reach for the stars, so I think that's really important that we have those things that support us in our communities. As a youth, I see the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the 94 calls to action has heightened the recognition on the struggles of our people, and that something is being done by both our people and non-Indigenous people. I hope to see a positive change over my lifetime. But I also think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission did not go far enough to address the wrongs that were inflicted on our people since European contact. I know the historical events that depopulated our people on Turtle Island. For instance, the deliberate germ warfare on our people, and the deliberate policies and laws that tried to eliminate our identity and our beliefs and values, which are found in the Indian Act. These are events that should be looked at, recorded and stated as fact in history. If Canada, as a government, wants reconciliation, our true history must be told, and the governments must do the best it can do to reconcile the damages that were done. We're very lucky that your school division has the opportunity to teach truthful and honest stuff about First Nations people. But it's unfortunate that a lot of places in Canada still are not open to allowing First Nations to help teach the youth of Canada. Also, as sovereign nations, we must make it clear to the federal government we are self-governing and we no longer need the oppressive Indian Act. And being under the colonial rule goes against our treaties, goes against our independence to be self-ruling. I think we need to embrace our treaties that lays the principal foundations for the youth. An important part about understanding treaty and understanding the preservation of our treaty territories will ensure our traditions, customs, and ceremonies will continue. We were all born from this land. This is where we hunt and we fish, we live our lives, we go out and hang out with our friends, we stay up late, and this is where we will die. And it's important that we keep it pure and we keep what our grandmothers and grandfathers taught us about taking care of our homes. I believe reconciliation can restore balance in our communities that promotes the traditional teachings of our grandfathers and grandmothers of equality, love, respect, and honesty. I realize that there's a lot to learn on the impacts of colonialism in the process of reconciliation, not just with First Nations here in Canada, but for Indigenous people around the world. To me, reconciliation is a process that involves equal commitment by both nations. Reconciliation is about being able to understand one another and to be able to sit down and not just listen, but feel the hopes of a brighter future. As a youth, I've committed myself to the challenges of learning First Nations beliefs, customs, and social issues, and how this can relate to decolonization, reconciliation, especially in our schools. I cherish the idea of a place where all people live as one, in peace and harmony, just like Creator intended. It's an idea that I hope we all should live for. And, well, I would like to have a conversation with you, because that's important to hear what all of you have to say. So if any of you have questions, you can ask. Hi, yeah.
Can you maybe just share what like you made this video for a project at the school that you go to. Can you talk about what the reaction was of your school and what happened when you presented this project?
Yes. So I created that video after coming back from my trip, and they basically told me no, that I couldn't share it. They said a lot of things, and they said that what I was saying in there was not true, and that it was wrong, and that you should never show that. But obviously I did, and that's why I'm here today, because that video is how I got to be here today and to speak to you. I mean, I never thought I would be here speaking to you, but I mean, I guess that's just Creator's plan, and I'm okay with that, because I know that I'll be looked after by the spirits that walk with me in my daily life. And maybe not a lot of people are open to the fact of understanding, or they might not know how to approach us as First Nations people respectively. And I've had talks with the Archbishop of the St. Boniface region, and it's just going to take time to get to the place that we all want to be. So
Thank you.
thank you, Miigwech.